You survived the dentist.
I did. The 7th of July, Rabbi Levitt, Chofetz Chaim. Yeah, he put a temporary crown. I can't see it. It's all the way back here. He did a good job.
Baruch Hashem.
Got to go back next week and get a permanent crown.
Right. Okay. Very good. That's Hashem. Okay, so we're starting now Klal Beis in Hilchos Isurei Rechilas, and we're going to see how this principle of Apei Tlas, of the speaker saying a statement about Poloni in front of three people, in the world of Hilchos Rechilas now. How does it work? Okay, so Roy, you want to start?
Aleph is just one line. Also, there's a pair Rechilos. It is forbidden for Reuben to relate Rechilos to Shimon by telling him how Levi undermined him. Afilu b'fnei yachid, even in the presence of a single person, that is Shimon himself. V'chol shochein b'fnei rabim, and it's certainly forbidden to do so in the presence of numerous listeners. There's a longish footnote. If Reuben informed Shimon privately how Levi undermined him, his words are not as likely to cause friction between the two parties as when he does so in the presence of other people and causes Shimon embarrassment. The Chofetz Chaim here teaches that the Rechilas prohibition applies only to the latter case where
Not only.
The Chofetz Chaim here teaches that the Rechilas prohibition applies not only to the latter case, not only to the latter case where the Rechilas was relayed publicly, but even in the former case where it was relayed to Shimon in private. In Be'er Mayim Chaim, the Chofetz Chaim explains that he comes to dispel an opposite mistaken notion as well. Some might think that speaking Rechilas publicly is a less grievous sin, since Reuben realizes that by repeating what Levi said in public, Levi is likely to hear about it. It is thus as if he spoke in Levi's presence and not behind his back, which is something that might seem to mitigate his transgression. And we'll refer to a note above. Now, the Chofetz Chaim teaches that speaking Rechilas publicly is also forbidden because one may not speak Rechilas even where the subject of the Rechilas, that's Levi, is actually present, as we'll see below in Klal 3, Sif 1.
Who's the subject of the Rechilas? Oh, that's this. In other words, okay, maybe we'll see. Okay.
In this case, Levi.
Levi is the subject, and Reuven is the speaker. Shimon is the listener.
Okay. All right. Okay, Sif base. Lou, you want to continue?
Okay.
Oh, you got a long one here.
The Chofetz Chaim applies the previous ruling to the more lenient case of avak rechilas, literally dust of rechilas, i.e. statements that are not explicitly derogatory, but which carry a possible negative connotation, which may lead to rechilas. Afilo avak rechilas, even avak rechilas. Kefi ma shenivaer lekaman bichlal Hashem ma nikra avak rechilas. The definition of which we will elaborate below. Gam kain asur l'saper bechol gavnei. It is also forbidden in all situations, regardless of whether there is a single listener or multiple listeners. Footnote says, in the following paragraph, the Chofetz Chaim will describe the case in which avak rechilas, i.e. an ambiguous statement that could connote rechilas, is forbidden even when said in the presence of three people. Apai talas. Talasa. We have learned above that relating a statement that allows for two interpretations, one derogatory and one not derogatory, is not prohibited when spoken in the presence of three people. That is because the speaker, Ruvain, realizes that his public statement may eventually be repeated to the subject of his account, Shimon. So they've changed. Shimon is now the subject. And he therefore is careful to express himself in a manner that would not convey anything derogatory about Shimon. This reflects Tosfos' understanding of the Apai Talasa license cited in our introduction to Apai Talasa. The same leniency applies to Rechilas. Thus, if Ruvain told Shimon something that Levi had done or said about Shimon, that may or may not be negative. And Ruvain told this to Shimon in the presence of three people, making it likely that Levi will hear about it. We assume that Ruvain meant the positive interpretation, and it is therefore not a violation of avak rechilas. Now we learned with regard to avak lashon hara, that if Ruvain makes an ambiguous statement about Shimon in a manner that strongly suggests that his report is meant to be derogatory, it is forbidden as avak lashon hara, even if it's said in the presence of three people. And the footnote says, many opinions are cited saying that this type of negative speech constitutes actual lashon hara rather than merely avak lashon hara. But the Chofetz Chaim calls it avak lashon hara. The Chofetz Chaim now applies the same ruling to the case of rechilas. Filu im hadibor shalo shemisaper lo ma she'amar loni. You can close the door, yes. Alav. Even if the actual words used by Ruvain when telling Shimon what Levi said about him, yesh lo shnei panim, could theoretically be interpreted in two different ways, one which is positive or neutral, so that what Levi had said was not harmful to Shimon, and the other is negative, so that what Levi said was harmful to Shimon. Im hu omra. Nevertheless, if Ruvain expresses those remarks, ba'ofen demuchach, in a manner that clearly implies kavanas rishon haya leganoso, that Levi's intention was to disparage Shimon. Bevadai asur b'chol gavne. Then it is definitely forbidden for him to do so under any circumstances. Even though the actual language used by Reuven is subject to interpretation, and even though it was said in the presence of three people, so that Reuven realizes that Levi will likely hear what he said, Reuven's words are still considered avak rechilas, since he expressed them in a manner that suggests a negative interpretation. And there's a scenario about that. You want me to read the scenario?
Yeah.
Michal mentions to Abigail that Tamar has too much on her mind and is always running late. Abigail brings up one such incident in front of several women, toning down Michal's comment to say she has a lot on her mind. Because Abigail intends to convey Michal's annoyance or comment, even if it could be considered neutral and is being said in public, is not permitted.
Okay.
Maybe that's a good place for me to hand the torch over.
Okay. Okay, Alan, would you like to continue?
Give me the place.
Footnote 5, Alan.
What page is it?
It's on page 22, middle of the page. So the last word in the line is moreover in bold.
About halfway down in the footnote. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11 lines up from the bottom. 11 lines up.
What's the first word on the left?
The last word on the page on the line is moreover.
The first word on the line is manner.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. So new sentence after 5, right?
Right.
Okay. But filu im hu motzi zeh mil shonos. Moreover, even if Reuven expresses this account to Shimon about what Levi said about him, but inyan de note yoser kaperosh rush or cher sheyesh bida vor in a way that suggests an alternative, favorable interpretation of his words. Shaka vornes hor rishon lo hor yesor legay nos so. Meaning it was said in a manner that clearly implies that Levi did not intend to disparage Shimon. LP Cain is nevertheless forbidden in the following cases. Ibhu Makir S Tiva O Shelzeh Hasheni Shahu Ish Niragon. If Reuven knows that by nature Shimon is a difficult and belligerent person, Hayani Shahu Don S Chevero Lechaf Chov to Amid, meaning Shimon is the type of person who constantly judges other people unfavorably. L'chol shechavero ose o medaber, and whenever someone does or says something pertaining to him, who omer kivain rock, he's a ger lo borzeh. He claims that a person meant only to antagonize him. Kamo Sheko Sav Abashar Ray Teshuva the Ray base Yonon in the manner described by Rabbeinu Yonah in Shari Teshuva Shar 3, Mama 231. O Shaye Levad Ze Kutzor Sinaor Beinehem Mich4, or if there was some pre-existing animosity in Shimon and Levi, then the fact that Reuven expresses the account in a favorable light does not matter. V'i Kozer Eino Tzorik Rak Lima So Ale Al Chevero. Since a person such as this, someone who has a difficult nature or who harbors a grudge against Levi, needs only the flimsiest excuse to find fault in the other person. It's forbidden under any circumstances to tell him anything that Levi said or did pertaining to him, for his report is certain to cause animosity regardless of the manner or tone in which it is said.
Okay.
That's why you gotta really be careful what you say, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's better to see keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, they say that, I think I heard this once, maybe somebody said it here, I heard it, also heard it. One way that there's a story about the Chofetz Chaim when he was, he heard people speaking Lashon Hara. He went over to them and he started talking about horses. And I don't know whether these people were interested in horses or they were not interested in horses, but the Chofetz Chaim was, he became an expert in horses, and he had a lot to say about them. And the people got interested in talking about the horses. And he was able successfully to change the subject matter completely from the subject of speaking about people, which often involves all sorts of prohibitions of Lashon Hara and Rechilas and Motzei Shemra, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when you talk about horses, don't have that problem. And then there's Feivel Cohen Zatzal, the Rabbin Posik in New York, author of very, very important works of Badi Shulchan and Halacha in Yordea. He told us that there's three types of people. There's three types of things to talk about, and different people talk about different types of things. He says some people talk about people, and that's a problem. And then the second thing is that people talk about things. They talk about things. They talk about horses. So that generally gets you away from Lashon Hara, unless you're talking about Plony's horse, like we saw before. If somebody says, "Oh, Plony, he sells horses that are no good," then you're really talking about Plony. You're not really talking about horses. So you're still talking about people. That gets you into trouble. He says the highest level is that a person speaks about ideas, and specifically, obviously, ideas in Torah. So one can speak in Torah, and then he's avoiding all of these prohibitions of Lashon Hara and Rechilas and Motzei Shemra and all of the different Isurim that there are involved. And not only that, he's got a mitzvah of Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Every word of Torah, says the Gaon, is a separate mitzvah of Talmud Torah, which outweighs all other mitzvahs. So that's the choice that we have to keep in mind. So yeah, so that's the right. Okay. Yeah, so that's what you're pointing out. You're saying, when you start talking about people, it's like you got this issue and that issue and that issue that Chofetz Chaim says, and you got to be careful about this. You got to be careful about that. But okay. Sif Gimel. We got 4 more minutes. For Sif Gimel, we go back to Roy to continue.
Yesh Omarim. There are some Rishonim who say De'im Echad Sipar Genus Al Chavaro Bifnei Shaloshov. There's some Rishonim who say that if Levi denigrated his fellow Jew, and Shimon, in the presence of 3 listeners, of his fellow Jew Shimon, in the presence of 3 listeners, there's some Rishonim who say that if Levi denigrated his fellow Jew Shimon in the presence of 3 listeners, to in bar mishum ravilos im yachzaru v'yamaru lo. In the presence of 3 listeners, then it is no longer considered rechilas for one of the listeners will tell Shimon. It's no longer considered rechilas for one of the listeners to then tell Shimon. Beploini deber aleha kach v'choch. Levi said such and such negative things about you. The reasoning behind this opinion is Mashum Tahu the bear Ashur the his the loss the betoch. The reasoning behind this opinion is because this matter, which was already heard by 3 people, will inevitably become known to Shimon in any case. Is law or lay. As per the dynamic of your friend has a friend, which predicts that the other listeners will disclose Levi's report to their friends and will in turn go and reveal this matter to their friends. So on. Until the matter becomes known to Shimon. Allow Asara Hatara that the Mashum Rachilas. The Torah thus did not prohibit this case on account of Rachilas, since in any case Shimon will inevitably find out what Levi said about him. Rak Tarich Lozeh, in order for this permit to apply, however, it is critical Aparatatim Amarim La'el Kahilchos Lashon Hara Kalal Base Metaif Dalad Ba'alu Lucho Ba'alacho. So it's critical that the conditions delineated in Hilchos Lashon Hara, Klal Tus F4 and onwards must be fulfilled. Aval ein lismoch al da'ah zo l'ma'asah. Nevertheless, although this permit does appear in the Rashbam, one should not only rely on this opinion in practice. Can someone go on, please?
Okay.
You want me to read
Well,
that?
Yeah,
It's 11:32.
Okay, time's up.
Time's up.
uh-huh.
Okay. Very good, Roy. Very good, Lou and Alan.
Okay. Thank you.
Koyach.
Well, it's going to be well. See you, Matt Hashem, on Sunday.
Okay. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you.
All the best. Everybody have a wonderful Shabbos.
You too.
Shabbat shalom.
Amen.
Bye.
Shalom.